I am Dracula. I bid you welcome.
This Halloween, you won't like me when I'm angry.
The Bloodstone.
Papa.
I bid you welcome.
Alright, I had to put every project on hold after this. I have to admit, I forgot they were remaking this. Again. 20 years after the first remake. One that I admittedly have not seen, though from what I gather, it wasn't as bad as this. Let me state that I have not read Salem's Lot. I have seen the original miniseries, and I got a lot of information and lore checks from friends who have read the books. But I'm not putting much focus on that for this review anyway. I rewatched the original in preparation with my girlfriend who's never seen it, and it's been many years since I had. We both enjoyed it, and then I told her that there was a new version coming out. And both of us immediately lost any ounce of excitement when we saw the runtime. The entirety of Salem's Lot in 2 hours. Roughly. So imagine if the It remake was not 2 parts, but one movie that covered both parts, and was only an hour and 50 minutes long. It also originally had a miniseries, a very good one, that was also turned into a good movie. Well, I've only seen the first part, but I remember it being pretty good at the time. It seems to be the most sensible case, well, actually the most sensible case is doing a miniseries with Salem's Lot, but if you wanted to do it into a movie, it should have been a 2-parter, but I guess King's name wasn't enough to secure that out of the studio. I'm not sure if it's because it's not as popular as It, COVID, I don't know. There was a lot of issues going on with the production of this film. From my understanding, Salem's Lot is one of King's best books, and at the time was even his own favorite. It's a good story. I like to think of it a lot like Silent Hill. It puts a lot of effort in building the town or the lot. It might seem like your happy small town, but it's chock full of bad and interesting history and drama that uncovers like a mystery. Obviously, you can't do all of that in 2 hours, which is already the immediate issue. But it's not the only one. The film begins about 40 minutes into the story with moving Barlow into the Marston house, a now younger Straker who leaves absolutely no impression in this movie. There's no suspense or build-up, it just immediately throws us into something spooky happening. A lot of generic beats going on here too. I'm guessing that's because of the director. I'm not very familiar with his works, but apparently those who aren't a big fan of his horror films. All I can say is this is very much a movie that does not stand out. Lewis Pullman now plays Ben Mears, who, instead of coming back after the death of his wife from a car accident, is only here because he needs inspiration and wants to write about the old Marston house. The film neglects any personal connection to the house, including removing one of the best scenes of dialogue.
I think I saw Hubie Marston hanging by his neck. His face green, his eyes puffed shut. His hands livid. It was ghastly.
I was afraid that they might do something with this scene that would be overwhelming flashbacks instead of giving us the strength of the actor's performance, but no, they just cut it out completely. They even greatly condensed the exposition of Hubie, which I find funny on one front to kind of combat the issue with a lot of modern productions that have so many exposition dumps at the very beginning. But the ghost story also is kind of important here. But in this version, his parents were killed in a car accident when he was a kid. Who knows who did it? Probably this bitch, and that's why he left. It's a weird plot point that they open with no real resolve. He meets Susan, replacing Boom Boom Bonnie here. I don't necessarily think her performance is the issue here as much as the writing.
Are you from around here?
I grew up here till I was 9, yeah.
So maybe that's why you look so familiar.
This film struggles to make characters feel human in their interactions. Case in point with Parkins.
What are you, some kind of an author?
Yeah.
I was also struggling a bit to place the time period. It's set to be in the 70s like the original, it seems, but this does not really convey that time period very well. I guess the cars and sideburns are enough to do it. I'm not super familiar with Lewis Pullman, but he's certainly not a protagonist in this film. He barely even feels like a side character that gets the spotlight randomly thrown onto him at times. He also keeps doing this bottom lip thing. I'm not sure what that's about. Then we get to Mark. Insert generic Stephen King school bully. Mark, from what I gather, is more novel accurate this time in description. And by that, I mean he has glasses now. The character is virtually unchanged, and the young Jordan Carter does a good job with the script. He might actually be the highlight of this film alongside Burke. The biggest thing that we lost with Mark here is his relationship with his father. The original did so well to illustrate the distance between them.
Mark, when are you gonna outgrow all this?
Soon, I guess.
Adding in this extra sense of stress and embarrassment to the poor kid who just liked horror movies. His parents don't really show up in the story at all until it's time for them to die. It was nice of them to add this Houdini element to Mark. It did feel somewhat random in the original for his ability to break out of being tied up. No, but seriously, how the fuck did this kid get a poster for Trog? I might be in the minority here, but I, for the most part, really liked Burke in this one. I did buy him and Ben having more of a friend relationship as they were supposed to over the former teacher and student relationship of the original. I have no idea if the drive-in is in any relevance to the novel, but it makes for an interesting, I guess, finale, and it introduces this hiding in trunks element. Neat. Susan and Ben share more of an actual relationship this time, meaning that they let Susan be more of a character, which can be a pro or a con. It's good that they let her be more of a character, but it's bad because it's so poorly written.
What about you? What's your story?
Overall, it's still nice to see her having something to add to the story this time. Straker, not so much. I absolutely loved the sequence of the Glick boys walking in the woods. It was so visually pleasing. It carried a nice classic horror style to it with the blue lighting in the back, and it gave this nostalgic vintage horror feeling. And it was really good until this happened. Unfortunately, there's nothing ominous here. The movie goes ahead and just tells you everything. It goes right into the vampire stuff. It's completely devoid of any mystery or suspense. And Straker is now Renfield, I guess?
It is I, Striker, your devoted servant. I have returned, master. I bring you sacrifice.
They seem to strip away the eerie, sophisticated nature of him. What I was excited for was the potential of Father Callahan being a character here. And we see a little bit more of his character, but they still messed up his death. In the book, his blood is tainted by Barlow, which makes it impossible for him to enter the church. Here he just gets ate, like the original. Ah yes, every child's favorite bedtime story, Watership Down. Very appropriate book after the disappearance of his brother. Instead of Ralphie scratching the windows, this time Danny goes outside to some overly dark fog and walks around and then off-screen vampire stuff. It was kind of surprising given how this movie likes to have everything fast-paced and action-like that they even let a scene like this exist. And then Kid ate his own blood bag. Nothing quite like munching on a PBJ at a kid's funeral, am I right? Mike's death is at nighttime now for more dark compositions, thanks for that. They actually did a clever little fake out here. Instead of Danny waiting in the casket with his eyes already open, he still appears dead, only to have a fake out which turns into a cheap and poorly done jump scare. There are times when what we don't see scares us more than what we do see. Then there are times when something scary is in front of us and we can't do anything about it. It doesn't need to be fast. It doesn't need to be a jump scare. Its presence alone should command fear. Our eyes should be glued to it and unable to look away. I don't know what it was about the 70s, but vampires were really creepy at this time. The CGI glowing eyes doesn't really achieve the same effect. It does look pretty cool from a distance, but when you get closer, you can see these vampires are a little too clean. They're lacking that texture, that raw, crackled, cold, gray, broken look. Here they look low opacity. I think the difference in presentation with Mike's vampire should be evidence enough. The original, he's rocking in a chair right in front of us, raspy breathing, no forced ambience, or that damn generic bass rumble in this film that they like to use a lot. Now we have a more fascinating approach with glow stick crucifixes. Cue Blade Rave music. Oh, there it is. Here's one of the most iconic scenes of horror that scared the crap out of kids back in the 70s and burned the image into their minds for years to come. Here, it's aight. It's not nearly as creepy, mostly because the vampires don't look as creepy, but I guess it is a little less stiff. Take with that what you will. Burke doesn't have a heart attack this time, but instead replaces Susan in Mike's quest and ends up with the same result. Afterwards is the scene that solidified to me that this movie was bad. Up until this point, I was thinking, yeah, this is just a mediocre attempt at Salem's Lot. Nothing special, but it's not outrightly awful. This scene took all of that away.
That's it.
What?
I don't know. You're the writer. Think of something. That's it.
In the name of the...
I can't believe a human being wrote this. Even more disturbing, they filmed it. Did they think that this was funny?
And the holy shit, it's glowing!
This scene isn't even supposed to be funny. It's supposed to be the confirmation to our protagonist that vampires exist. He starts praying out of genuine fear and hope for protection. Here, it's turned into a gag. And apparently, rabies shots with a crucifix cures vampirism. People were waiting like 3 years for this movie. It's immensely difficult to further talk about the film after that, but somehow the writing actually gets worse. Hey Ben, your friend just turned into a vampire and died. You wanna try showing any ounce of emotion? Just a little bit? Just a tiny little bit? Nah. Silly of me, that's asking for too much, isn't it? Why on earth would I want any sort of reaction from the protagonist of the story whose friend just died? No, that's crazy. At least we get this little joke line, you know?
You're like, what, 11?
You know, this movie does have some really good shots. It really does. It looks pretty. I just hate that every time someone talks, I kind of want to shove a stake through my own ear. And Barlow is CG now. It appears they went back to the Nosferatu Orlok approach from the 70s miniseries. In the book, he was supposed to look more human-like, like Dracula. The 70s wanted to go back to the scary look for vampires, and it works pretty damn well. It's definitely one of the more memorable vampire appearances, even if he does act a little goofy. I really need the Nosferatu remake to be good. I really do. Susan's death and vampiric turn isn't anywhere near as emotional or as settling as it should have been. It was nice of Lewis to remind us that he's getting paid for this, though. This shot is dope as hell. This is what I wanted. Hell, this is what I imagined the conclusion of Salem's Lot turning out to be. All of these vampires decorating the streets and rooftops. The whole shot or sequence is so good, I wish they kept it quiet instead of this bizarre music. And then it gets really goofy when he starts running. The movie ends with Susan's mom chasing Ben with a shotgun. Yeah, that's about as intelligent as Elle chasing a light down the street with a gun. I really hope that's not in the book. The final battle happens in the drive-in, and it's underwhelming to say the least. And then it just ends. No epilogue or anything, it just ends there, and it is a colossal disappointment. It lacks any intimacy, tension, build-up, suspense, or horror. There's no time for us, the audience, to care about anything. It's so incredibly dull and lifeless. In fact, somehow, watching this felt longer than the 3-hour original miniseries. That's how dull it was. They took a cool story and completely stripped it leaving just a greatest hits volume without any of the build-up that make those scenes even matter. And even the ones that were recreated hardly had any bite to them. It's half-baked and frankly doesn't stand out. And that's probably why nobody is even talking about this movie. With all these other controversial films out, Salem's Lot is just not even worth the effort. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe, as it really helps my channel out a lot. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.